I never thought I'd end up in a place like Blackwood. The village, tucked away in the rolling hills of England, seemed the perfect escape from the chaos of London. My name is James Hawthorne, and this is the story of how a fresh start turned into a nightmare I could never have imagined. I arrived in Blackwood on a dreary autumn evening. The sky was a slate gray, and a fine mist clung to the air, giving the village an ethereal, almost otherworldly feel. My new home was a quaint cottage on the edge of the village, far enough from the bustle to feel secluded but close enough to still be part of the community. The locals were friendly, albeit a bit reserved, and I quickly became a familiar face at the village pub, the Raven's Nest. It was there that I first heard about Blackwood Manor. "You're new around here, aren't you?" an elderly man asked, his voice gravelly from years of smoking. "Name's Collins. Lived here all my life." "James Hawthorne," I replied, shaking his offered hand. "You heard about the manor yet?" he asked, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Can't say I have," I said, taking a sip of my beer. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Blackwood Manor's been abandoned for years. Folks say it's haunted. Strange things happen up there." I laughed, assuming it was a local legend meant to spook newcomers. But Mr. Collins's expression remained serious. "If you know what's good for you, you'll stay away from that place." The warning played on my mind as I settled into my new life. Days passed uneventfully until one night, I woke to the sound of footsteps echoing through the house. I lived alone. I grabbed a flashlight and crept downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing nothing out of the ordinary. I convinced myself it was just the house settling and went back to bed, but the unease lingered. The next day, I visited the local library, hoping to learn more about my new home. There, I met Emma, a young historian with a passion for local lore. "Blackwood Manor. That's quite the topic," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Why do you ask?" I hesitated, unsure how to explain my sudden interest without sounding like a fool. "Just curious, I guess. Mr. Collins mentioned it, and it piqued my interest." Emma's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Well, you're in luck. I've been researching the manor for years. It has a fascinating, albeit dark, history. As we delved into the manor's past, I discovered it had been the site of numerous tragedies, from mysterious deaths to disappearances. The more I learned, the more I realized that Mr. Collins's warning might have been more than just a ghost story." Emma and I spent countless hours in the dusty archives of the Blackwood Library, piecing together the manor's dark history. As the days grew shorter and the nights colder, the sense of dread surrounding the manor seemed to seep into every aspect of my life. One particularly gloomy afternoon, Emma uncovered an old diary. The leather-bound book belonged to Amelia Ravenscroft, the last known resident of Blackwood Manor. As we flipped through the yellowed pages, a chilling story began to unfold. January 3, 1856. The manor is colder than ever, and the servants whisper of ghostly apparitions. I hear them too, the voices in the walls, the footsteps in the halls. Father insists it's nonsense, but I fear there is something more sinister at play. Emma glanced at me, her face pale. This aligns with the reports of strange occurrences around that time. It wasn't just local superstition. The more we read, the clearer it became that Amelia had been tormented by something malevolent. Her final entry was particularly harrowing. February 14, 1856. This will be my last entry. The presence is growing stronger, and I no longer feel safe in my own home. If anyone finds this, know that Blackwood Manor is cursed. Leave and never look back. As I closed the diary, a chill ran down my spine. It was clear that whatever haunted Amelia still lingered in the manor. and it seemed to have taken an interest in me. The supernatural occurrences at my cottage became more frequent and more violent. Objects moved on their own, and whispers filled the night air. One evening, as I sat by the fireplace trying to read, the lights flickered and went out. In the sudden darkness, I felt a cold presence behind me. "James," a voice whispered, sending shivers down my spine. I turned, flashlight in hand, but there was no one there. The experience left me shaken, and I knew I couldn't face this alone. I needed Emma's help. The next morning, I found her at the library, surrounded by books and papers. Her eyes were wide with excitement. "I found something," she said, thrusting an old newspaper into my hands. The headline read, "Mysterious Disappearance at Blackwood Manor." The article detailed the vanishing of a young girl named Eleanor Ravenscroft, Amelia's sister, who was never found. "We need to find out what happened to Eleanor," Emma said, her voice trembling with determination. "I think she's the key to all of this." That night, we decided to visit Mr. Collins. The old man had lived in Blackwood his entire life, and if anyone knew the truth, it was him. "I warned you, didn't I?" he said when we arrived at his door. "The manor is cursed. It's not safe." "Please, Mr. Collins," I pleaded. "We need to know what happened to Eleanor Ravenscroft." The old man sighed heavily, ushering us inside. "Very well. But be warned, the truth is darker than you can imagine." Armed with Mr. Collins's grim account of Eleanor's disappearance and the malevolent spirit haunting Blackwood Manor, Emma and I prepared for our final confrontation. According to Mr. Collins, Eleanor had been a victim of a dark ritual performed by a secret cult that once thrived in Blackwood. The cult believed sacrificing young girls would grant them immortality, but something went horribly wrong, binding Eleanor's spirit to the manor. As we approached Blackwood Manor under the cover of night, the air grew thick with an oppressive energy. The once grand estate was now a decaying relic, its windows dark and lifeless. The door creaked ominously as we pushed it open and stepped inside. The atmosphere was suffocating, and every shadow seemed to writhe with unseen malice. We made our way through the dark corridors, guided by the faint glow of our flashlights. As we reached the heart of the manor, the temperature plummeted, and the air grew still. Suddenly, the walls echoed with a ghostly wail. "Eleanor," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the din. In the center of the room, a spectral figure appeared. It was a young girl, her face twisted in anguish. "Help me," she cried, her voice a haunting echo. "We're here to free you," I said, stepping forward. "Tell us how." The spirit's eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then, with a sudden rush of wind, the room plunged into chaos. The spirit of Eleanor was not alone. Dark shadows swirled around us, the malevolent entities that had bound her to this place. Emma and I recited the incantation Mr. Collins had given us, our voices steady despite the growing terror. The shadows shrieked and recoiled, but the spirit of Eleanor remained, her eyes pleading. With a final, desperate effort, we completed the ritual. The shadows dissipated, and Eleanor's spirit began to fade. "Thank you," she whispered, a sad smile on her face before she vanished completely. The ordeal left us exhausted but relieved. The haunting presence was gone, and Blackwood Manor was finally at peace. As the first light of dawn broke through the windows, Emma and I stood in silence, reflecting on the night's events. In the days that followed, the village seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The strange occurrences ceased, and life slowly returned to normal. But for me, Blackwood would never be the same. I decided to stay in the village, finding solace in its quiet charm and a newfound friendship with Emma. We continued to explore the local history, uncovering stories that were less terrifying but just as fascinating. As for Blackwood Manor, it remained empty, a silent sentinel over the village. Some nights, I would walk by and feel a gentle breeze, almost as if Eleanor was saying thank you. The manor's shadows were no longer a source of fear but a reminder of the past and the resilience of the human spirit. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I still hear whispers. And I wonder if the darkness that once haunted Blackwood Manor is truly gone, or if it's just waiting for another opportunity to return. I never imagined returning to my hometown of Vila Sombra, a small, unassuming village nestled deep in the Brazilian interior. My name is Carlos Mendes, and I've spent the last 10 years living in Sao Paulo, far from the shadows of my past. But fate has a cruel way of pulling me back to where it all began. The day I received the letter was like any other. A monotonous Tuesday, with the cacophony of city life buzzing in the background. The envelope was plain, with no return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was from my childhood friend, João. We hadn't spoken in years, not since that tragic night. The letter was brief, almost cryptic. Carlos, you need to come back. It's happening again. Against my better judgment, I boarded a bus the next day, my mind racing with memories of the past. As the landscape changed from concrete to lush greenery, an unease settled over me. Vila Sombra was a place of forgotten nightmares, a place where darkness thrived. Arriving in Vila Sombra felt like stepping back in time. The cobbled streets, the old church with its peeling paint, and the familiar faces of the villagers brought a sense of nostalgia mixed with dread. João met me at the bus stop, his face gaunt and eyes haunted. "It's good to see you, Carlos," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I wish it were under different circumstances." As we walked to his house, João filled me in on the disturbing events that had been plaguing the village. People were disappearing, strange noises echoed through the night, and an oppressive darkness seemed to hang over everything. "The shadows, Carlos," João said, his voice trembling. "They've returned. Just like when we were kids." That night, as we sat in João's dimly lit living room, memories of our childhood resurfaced. We had always been told to stay away from the old abandoned house at the edge of the village. It was said to be cursed, haunted by the spirits of those who had died tragically within its walls. But like all curious children, we couldn't resist. One fateful evening, we snuck into the house. The air was thick with an otherworldly chill, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. We heard whispers, saw fleeting shapes, and then, nothing. We woke up outside the house, hours later, with no memory of how we got there. After that night, our friend Miguel disappeared, and we never spoke of it again. "The house is alive, Carlos," João said, breaking the heavy silence. "It's calling us back." Determined to uncover the truth, we gathered a small group of trusted friends. Maria, a local historian, Pedro, the village priest, and Ana, a journalist with a knack for uncovering secrets. Together, we made our way to the abandoned house, armed with flashlights and a resolve to end the nightmare. The house loomed before us, its windows like dark eyes watching our every move. As we stepped inside, the air grew colder, and an eerie silence enveloped us. Shadows danced on the walls, and a sense of foreboding settled over us. "We need to find the source of the darkness," Pedro said, clutching his rosary. "It's the only way to free this village." As we explored the house, we stumbled upon an old journal hidden beneath the floorboards. It belonged to a man named Joaquin, who had lived there over a century ago. His writings detailed a ritual gone wrong, a desperate attempt to bring back his deceased wife that instead unleashed a malevolent force. "The shadows," Joaquin wrote, "they are not spirits, but echoes of our darkest fears and regrets. They feed on our pain, growing stronger with each life they consume. We realized that the only way to stop the shadows was to confront our own fears and regrets. The house was a mirror, reflecting the darkness within us. With this newfound knowledge, we braced ourselves for the final confrontation. The shadows grew more aggressive, their whispers turning into guttural growls. We formed a circle, holding hands, and spoke aloud our deepest fears and regrets. As we did, the shadows began to wail, their forms twisting and writhing. The air crackled with energy, and a blinding light erupted from the center of our circle. The shadows dissipated, their anguished cries fading into silence. The house was still, the oppressive darkness lifted. We emerged, blinking into the sunlight, feeling a weight lifted from our shoulders. The village of Villa Sombra was safe once more. In the days that followed, life slowly returned to normal. The missing villagers were found, dazed but alive. Joao and I reconnected, our bond stronger than ever. The old house was demolished, its cursed history buried with it. But as I prepared to leave Villa Sombra, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were not truly gone. They were a part of us, lurking in the recesses of our minds, waiting for the right moment to return. Years later, as I sit in my Sao Paulo apartment, I find myself drawn to the memories of Villa Sombra. The village, with its serene beauty and dark history, calls to me still. I know that one day, I will have to return. The shadows may be dormant, but they are never truly gone. For now, I live with the knowledge that we all carry our own shadows, and sometimes, confronting them is the only way to truly be free.